I was using a nail gun to fix my parents' roof in the scorching heat of a North Carolina July. Suddenly, my gaze slammed into a file folder left open on my father's workbench just inside the window. Last Will and Testament, with my name crossed out in thick, crimson red ink. The world around me seemed to tilt on its axis. My chest tightened as if I had just taken a round to the vest. The nail gun slipped from my sweaty grip, clattering against the shingles with a dry thud, but my ears were ringing with the deafening hum of betrayal pulsing through every vein. I read the line highlighted in yellow. All assets to Imani. Molly receives nothing as she is self-sufficient. I am Sergeant Molly Cook, the woman who has sent $800 every single month for 5 years just to keep this roof from collapsing on their heads. Why has my sacrifice and my strength become the weapon my own parents used to punish me? Does a soldier's loyalty mean anything when the enemy isn't across the battlefield but sleeping in the very next room? I wiped a mixture of grit and sweat from my forehead, leaving a muddy streak across my brow. I'd been up here for 4 hours. The humidity in Fayetteville doesn't just make you hot, it tries to drown you. My knees were raw from kneeling on the rough asphalt shingles, and my back screamed in protest. I was spending my leave, my precious time off from the base, doing manual labor that would have cost them $3,000 if they had hired a contractor. Through the open window below my boots, a blast of cold, conditioned air escaped, carrying the sound of giggling. It was Imani. She was filming another TikTok in the living room. I could hear the repetitive, high-pitched pop music looping over and over. That air conditioner, humming away to keep her cool while she danced, was running on the electricity bill I paid last week. Molly! My father's voice boomed from the front porch. He didn't sound concerned. He sounded impatient. Pick up the pace up there. The forecast says thunderstorms by 6. I don't want a leak in the ceiling while I'm watching the game. I paused, the hammer heavy in my hand. No, thank you. No, do you need water? Just a command. Richard Cook sat in his rocking chair, likely nursing his second beer of the afternoon, acting like the foreman of a job site where I was the unpaid intern. The disdain in his voice was clear. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was a utility. I was an appliance that fixed things when they broke and dispensed cash when they were broke. My throat felt like I had swallowed sandpaper. I climbed down the ladder, my boots heavy, needing water before I passed out. I walked into the house, and the temperature drop was instant. It felt good on my skin, but the atmosphere inside froze my blood. I walked past the kitchen table to grab a bottle of water, and that was when I saw it properly. The folder. It was lying on Dad's cluttered desk, right next to his empty beer cans. It wasn't just a draft, it was notarized. I walked over, my hand trembling slightly, not from fatigue, but from a rising cold dread. I read the handwritten note in the margins. It was my mother's handwriting, loopy and decorative, the same script she used for church potluck labels. Molly has the army to look after her. She's strong. She doesn't need the help. I stood there, paralyzed. For 5 years, I've lived in a cramped apartment off base. I drove a 10-year-old truck with a rattling transmission. I ate ramen and chow hall food so I could send home $40,000. $40,000. I missed nights out with my squad. I took extra duty shifts. I did it because I thought we were a team. I thought I was securing our family home. But I wasn't. I was renovating Imani's future house. I was building a nest for a cuckoo bird that had never worked a day in her life, while I was being erased from the future because I had the audacity to be successful. I grabbed the folder. The paper crinkled under my grip. I walked into the living room and threw it onto the coffee table. The thwack sound was loud enough to cut through the noise of Imani's phone. Dad looked up from the TV, his eyes narrowing not with shame, but with the irritation of a man whose privacy had been breached. Mom walked in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "What is this?" I asked. My voice was dangerously quiet. Mom didn't even flinch. She launched into the script I'd heard 1,000 times, weaponizing her faith like a bayonet. "Don't be selfish, Molly," she said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension. "Look at you. You are a sergeant. You have a pension waiting. You have the government, your sister. She's delicate. She needs security. Delicate, I repeated. She's 22, Mom. She's not disabled. She's lazy. Judge not, lest ye be judged, Mom snapped, her eyes hardening. The Lord teaches that the strong must carry the weak. You are being blessed with strength, so you must bear the burden. Why are you so greedy? Why do you want to take from your sister? They were looking at me like I was the villain. They were punishing me for my discipline. Because I woke up at 0500 every day, because I polished my boots, because I served my country, I deserved nothing. Because Imani slept until noon and quit every job after 2 weeks, she deserved everything. I looked at Imani. She was lounging on the sofa, popping a bubble with her gum. She didn't look up from her screen. You're making a scene, Molly, she said, her voice flat and bored. It's just money. You always make everything so dramatic. It's just money. That sentence was the click of the safety coming off. Something inside my chest, the part of me that was still a desperate little girl wanting her parents' approval, finally died. It was replaced by the cold steel resolve of an NCO. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I straightened my back, my posture shifting into the rigid stance of a soldier on review. Understood, I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. If I am an outsider in this will, then I am an outsider in the bills. What does that mean? Dad asked, finally sitting up. It means the contractor just quit, I said. I turned on my heel and marched up the stairs. I didn't pack everything. I only took what I could carry in my assault pack. My uniform, my laptop, my dignity. It took me exactly 5 minutes. As I walked back down the stairs, ignoring the stunned silence in the living room, I headed for the front door. If you walk out that door, you're ungrateful, Mom screamed after me, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. After everything we did to raise you, do not come back here, Molly, do you hear me? My hand hovered over the doorknob. Her words tried to claw me back, tried to plant that seed of guilt they had watered for 26 years. I need to know I'm not crazy for doing this. If you have ever felt punished just for being the strong one in your family, please hit that like button to stand with me. And drop a walk away in the comments if you think I am making the right choice. I tightened my grip on the handle. I opened the door. The heat of the afternoon hit me again, but this time, it felt like freedom. I didn't look back. I stepped out and I let the door slam shut on the life I used to know. I sat on the floor of my cramped one-bedroom apartment near Fort Liberty, surrounded by the few boxes I had managed to take with me. The air smelled of stale coffee and dust, a sharp contrast to the lavender-scented, air-conditioned lie I'd left behind at my parents' house. But this air was mine. I opened my laptop. It hummed to life, the fan whirring loudly in the quiet room. This was no longer just a computer. It was my war room. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing in the password for MyPay, the military payroll system. The screen loaded, displaying the breakdown of my hard-earned salary. I navigated to the Allotments tab. There it was, sitting at the top of the list like a parasitic leech attached to my bank account. Richard and Deborah Cook, $800. My cursor hovered over the Stop button. For a split second, my hand froze. A lifetime of conditioning washed over me. I heard my mother's voice in my head, preaching about honoring thy father and mother. I felt the phantom weight of guilt, the terrifying thought that I was abandoning them. But then, the image of that file folder flashed in my mind. I saw the red ink crossing out my name. I heard the sound of Imani giggling while I sweated on the roof. I didn't just click the mouse. I struck the enter key with the force of a hammer strike. Processing. Updated. The line item vanished. The $800 was back in my column. I didn't stop there. I opened a new tab. USAA Bank. I pulled up the bill pay section. Duke Energy, Spectrum Internet, the Fayetteville Water Department. Each utility account was linked to my checking account on auto draft. I went down the list with the efficiency of a sniper taking out targets. Unlink account. Confirm. Remove payment method. Confirm. Cancel autopay. Confirm. With every click, I felt a physical sensation of lightness, as if heavy chains were snapping off my wrists one by one. I wasn't just cutting off the money, I was performing surgery to remove a malignancy that had been feeding on my future for 5 years. Then, I waited. I expected the explosion to be immediate, but for the first 24 hours, there was nothing. Then, 48 hours. Then, a week. 2 full weeks passed in absolute silence. No one called. No one texted to ask if I'd found a place to sleep. No one asked if I was safe. The silence was louder than any screaming match. It confirmed the darkest fear living in the pit of my stomach. They didn't miss me. They didn't care that I was gone. They assumed I was just throwing a temper tantrum, that I was pouting, and would eventually come crawling back to resume my duties as the family ATM. I checked Instagram from a burner account. Imani was posting daily. There was a photo of her hand holding a venti Starbucks cup with the caption, "Slow living, manifesting abundance." She was wearing a new pair of designer sunglasses. She was burning through the cash I had sent the previous month, completely oblivious to the financial hurricane that was currently brewing just off her coast. Their ignorance was truly breathtaking. Then came the 15th of the month, the day the bills were due. I was cleaning my service rifle at my kitchen table, the smell of CLP oil filling the room, when my phone vibrated against the wood. It was Dad. My heart gave a stupid, hopeful little jump before I read the preview. There was no "hello," no "I love you." The text read, "Internet is down. Did you forget to update the card? I'm missing the second quarter of the game." I stared at the screen, and a dry, bitter laugh escaped my throat. The sheer audacity of this man. He had kicked me out, disinherited me, and told me I was ungrateful, yet he still considered my payment of his internet bill as reliable a natural phenomenon as the sunrise. He wasn't worried about me, he was worried about missing a touchdown. I picked up the phone. I didn't type a paragraph. I didn't try to explain my feelings. I treated it like a tactical response. I typed, "I didn't forget. I just don't live there anymore. Ask the future owner of the house, Imani, to pay it." I hit send. The reaction was nuclear. Within 30 seconds, my phone began to buzz violently, dancing across the table. First, a text from Dad in all capital letters. "You are an ungrateful brat. Do you want your parents to rot? Turn it back on now." Then, a call from Mom. I declined it. Immediately, a voicemail popped up. I pressed play on speakerphone. Her voice filled the empty apartment, trembling with a performance-worthy sob. "Molly, I cannot believe you would be so petty. We are family. You are counting pennies with the people who raised you? You are breaking my heart, Molly. God is watching you." She wasn't heartbroken because she lost a daughter. She was heartbroken because she lost her convenience. She was realizing that the strong daughter wasn't going to carry the load anymore, and the delicate daughter couldn't lift a finger. I looked at the phone vibrating again. Imani was calling now. I didn't answer. I turned the volume off and tossed the phone onto the cheap sofa across the room. It landed face down on the cushions. Let them scream into the void. The bank of Molly was closed. I picked up the rag and went back to polishing my rifle. The silence in my apartment returned, but this time it didn't feel lonely. It felt like victory. But looking at that phone, seeing the relentless stream of notifications lighting up the room, I knew this was just the opening skirmish. I had cut their supply lines. Now, they were going to get desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. They didn't stop with the silence. When the silence failed to bring me crawling back, they changed tactics. They decided to lay siege to the only thing I had left, my reputation. It started with a notification on my phone, then another, then 5 more in rapid succession. I opened Facebook and my stomach turned. My mother, Deborah, had started sharing articles, not just random news, but specific weaponized links with titles like "The Sin of Abandonment," "When Children Forsake Their Elders," and "Honoring Thy Father and Mother," a commandment, not a suggestion. She wasn't tagging me directly. That would be too obvious. She was tagging my aunts, my uncles, and her church friends in Ohio and Virginia. She was building a narrative. She was painting a picture of a destitute, heartbroken couple abandoned by their cold-hearted soldier daughter. Then came the message from Aunt Sarah. "Molly, I just saw your mother's post. She told me you cut off your father's medicine money. I didn't know the army taught you to be cruel. How do you sleep at night?" My hands shook as I held the phone. Medicine money? I paid the internet bill, the water, the electricity. Dad's VA benefits covered his prescriptions. They were lying. They were systematically dismantling my character to everyone we knew. They knew I valued honor above everything else, so they decided to attack the very thing that made me a soldier. It was a level of cowardice I had never seen, even in basic training. I didn't reply to Aunt Sarah. Whatever I said would just be twisted. I blocked her. Then, the strategy shifted again. Good Cop entered the chat. A text came through from Imani. The tone was completely different from the dismissive girl chewing gum a few weeks ago. "Hey sis, I'm sorry if I upset you. I know things are tense." I stared at the screen, waiting for the hook. It came in the next bubble. "But listen, we have a real emergency. Dad's back is really bad again. He can't pick up any shifts at the warehouse. We just got the notice for the property taxes. It's $3,500. If we don't pay by Friday, the county puts a lien on the house. Please, Molly, just this once. Don't let us lose the house." $3,500. A massive sum. And the excuse? Dad's bad back. The same bad back that miraculously healed whenever his buddies came over to watch football or go fishing, but flared up the moment a job application appeared. Imani was trying to pick my pocket using pity. She was counting on my savior complex. She thought if she dangled the threat of foreclosure, the threat of losing the home I had spent 5 years saving, I would panic and pay. I typed my response slowly. I let the anger sharpen my focus. "You are 22 years old, Imani. You have 2 working arms and 2 working legs. McDonald's is hiring starting at $15 an hour. I hear they have flexible shifts." I hit send. The mask fell off instantly. The sweet sister vanished. "You are such a bitch," her reply came through seconds later. "You think you're better than us just because you wear a uniform? You're just jealous. You're jealous because Mom and Dad love me more than they ever loved you. Keep your dirty money." I read the text twice. Because Mom and Dad love me more. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut, but strangely, it was also cauterizing the wound. She'd said the quiet part out loud. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a confirmed kill. I didn't have an obligation to finance a love that excluded me. I remembered the story of Jesus in the temple. He didn't gently ask the money changers to leave. He made a whip of cords and drove them out. Sometimes anger isn't a sin. Sometimes anger is holy. It is the only appropriate response to injustice. I took a screenshot of her text. Click. Evidence. I went to sleep that night feeling a strange, hollow peace. But the enemy wasn't done. The next morning, I was drinking black coffee when my banking app notification chimed. I opened USAA. There was a pending money request from Deborah Cook. Amount, $3,500. Note, family obligation. They were trying to force my hand through the banking system. They thought I would be too ashamed to reject a formal request from my mother. They were banking on my weakness. I stared at the red button on the screen. Decline. My thumb hovered over it. If I pressed this, there was no going back. This wasn't just saying no, this was a declaration of war. I pressed it. I pressed it so hard I thought I might crack the screen. 5 seconds later. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My phone vibrated with a text message from Dad. It wasn't whiny. It wasn't manipulative. It was terrifying. "You chose war, Molly. Don't blame us for what happens next. I am coming to you." The blood drained from my face. He wasn't just typing from his recliner anymore. He was mobile, and he was angry. I'm sitting here staring at that threat, and my hands are actually shaking. I need to know I have backup out there. If you believe I did the right thing by hitting that decline button, please smash that like button right now so I know I'm not alone. And drop a stand your ground in the comments if you've ever had to block a toxic family member. I stood up and walked to the door, checking the deadbolt. Then I checked it again. The digital war was over. The physical one was about to begin. 500 hours. The world outside my window was still pitch black. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, tightening the laces of my running shoes for morning PT. The rhythm of the morning was the only thing keeping me sane. Right foot, left foot, loop, swoop, and pull. Then, the silence shattered. It wasn't a knock. It was a bombardment. Someone was hammering on my front door with a fist heavy enough to rattle the frame. The doorbell began to ring incessantly, a shrill, continuous scream that pierced my eardrums. My heart rate spiked from 60 to 100 in a single beat. I didn't freeze. I moved. I crossed the small living room in 3 strides and pressed my eye to the peephole. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was the nightmare I thought I had left 3 hours away. My father, Richard, was red-faced and pounding on the wood. My mother, Deborah, was standing behind him, wailing loudly enough to wake the dead. Imani was leaning against the wall, looking bored but expectant, like a vulture waiting for roadkill. They had driven 3 hours in the middle of the night. This wasn't a visit. This was an ambush. From down the hall, Mrs. Higgins's terrier started barking frantically. Lights under the neighbors' doors flickered on. This was their strategy: public shaming. Make enough noise that I would surrender just to make it stop. I unlocked the deadbolt and threw the door open, but I planted my feet firmly in the threshold, blocking the entrance with my body. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the sentry. And they were the hostile force. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Mom didn't answer me. She played to the audience. She saw Mrs. Higgins peek her head out of apartment 4B and immediately threw her hands up. "Oh, my baby," Mom shrieked, lunging forward as if to hug me or push past me. "How could you be so cruel, abandoning your parents in their time of need? We are destitute, Molly, destitute," she was sobbing without tears. It was a performance worthy of daytime television. Dad didn't bother with the act. He stepped into my personal space, bringing with him the sour, stale smell of yesterday's cheap beer and unwashed flannel. His eyes were bloodshot, swimming with a mixture of exhaustion and rage. "Cut the crap, Molly," he growled, pointing a thick finger in my face. "You think you can just hide? Give me the debit card. Now, you owe me $3,500 for those taxes. Hand it over, and maybe I won't tell everyone what a piece of trash you are." He didn't look at me like I was his child. He looked at me like I was a broken ATM that just needed to be kicked a few times to dispense cash. "You are trespassing," I said, keeping my hands up, palms open, defensive posture. "Get out." "This is family business," Dad shouted, spitting flecks of saliva. While I was focused on holding the line against Dad's bulk, I saw movement in my peripheral vision. Imani. She was small and slippery. While Dad and Mom created the wall of noise, she dipped under my arm, trying to snake her way into the apartment. Her eyes were locked on the coffee table behind me, where my wallet and my government-issued laptop sat. My training kicked in before my brain could process the betrayal. I spun around, ignoring Dad, and grabbed Imani's wrist just as her fingers brushed the leather of my wallet. I didn't strike her. I applied a standard control hold, twisting her arm behind her back and pressing her forward until she was immobilized against the doorframe. "Do not touch my gear," I hissed. "Ow! Ow!" Imani screamed, her voice piercing and high like a siren. "She's hurting me! Daddy, she's breaking my arm! She's crazy!" Mom reacted instantly. She stopped wailing and lunged at me, her hand swinging wild. Crack! Her palm connected with my shoulder, a stinging slap meant for my face. "You brute!" Mom screamed, her face twisted into a mask of pure hate. "Is this what the army taught you? To beat up your little sister? You're a monster." I shoved Imani back into the hallway, forcing Mom and Dad to stumble backward to catch her. I stepped back into my apartment and pulled my phone from my pocket. "I am giving you 10 seconds to clear this hallway," I said. My voice wasn't shaking. It was dead calm. 10, 9. "You wouldn't dare," Dad sneered, stepping forward again. "You call the cops on your own flesh and blood? You ungrateful?" I tapped the screen. I put it on speakerphone and held it up like a shield. Fayetteville Police, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice rang out, clear and authoritative, in the cramped hallway. Dad froze. His face went from red to a pale, sickly gray. He was a bully, but like all bullies, he was terrified of real authority. He knew that if the police came, they would see a drunk man and a hysterical woman harassing a service member at 5 in the morning. Hang up, he hissed. I have intruders at my residence, I spoke clearly to the dispatcher. 3 individuals refusing to leave. We're leaving, Dad yelled, grabbing Mom's arm. We're leaving! You happy now, you traitor? He turned to go, but then he stopped. He looked at me one last time. The fear in his eyes was gone, replaced by something much darker. A cold, calculating malice. He cleared his throat and gathered a mouthful of phlegm. He spit it directly onto my welcome mat. Fine, you want to play by the rules, he said, his voice low enough that the phone wouldn't pick it up but loud enough for the venom to hit me. Let's see how long you keep that uniform, Molly. Let's see what your commanding officer thinks when I file a report that you're mentally unstable. You pulled a weapon on your sister. You're dangerous. And I'm going to make sure the Army knows it. He turned and dragged his family toward the elevator. I stood there, the dispatcher asking if I was still on the line. I stared at the spit on the floor. My heart was pounding against my ribs, not from the fight, but from the threat. He knew exactly where to hit me. He wasn't just coming for my money anymore. He was coming for my career. 2 days. That was how long it took for the other shoe to drop. It was 10 at night. I was sitting on my couch, the lights dimmed, trying to read a field manual just to keep my brain from eating itself alive. The silence in the apartment felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Then, it shattered. Bang! 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 3 sharp, authoritative knocks. This wasn't the drunken pounding of my father. This was the rhythmic, practiced knock of law enforcement. My stomach dropped through the floor. I walked to the door, my socks sliding on the laminate. I didn't ask who it was. I checked the peephole. The hallway was distorted by the fisheye lens, but the uniforms were unmistakable. Standing under the fluorescent light were a Fayetteville police officer, and behind him, 2 military police officers, MPs. My heart stopped. The local police were bad enough, but MPs? That meant my command was involved. That meant this wasn't just a domestic dispute anymore. This was official military business. Sergeant Cook, a voice boomed through the wood. Open the door. We need to conduct a welfare check. I unlocked the deadbolt with trembling fingers. I opened the door. Step back, Sergeant, the lead Fayetteville officer said. His hand rested instinctively near his holster. The MPs looked tense, their eyes scanning the room behind me. Is there a problem, officer? I asked. I tried to keep my voice steady, the way I would during a briefing, but I could hear the tremor in my own throat. We received a credible report from your family, the officer said, stepping into my living room without waiting for an invitation. They stated that you are suffering from a severe episode of PTSD, that you are armed, and that you have threatened self-harm and violence against family members. The room spun. It was the perfect lie. My parents knew exactly how the military worked. They knew that the Army is terrified of the veteran suicide statistic. They knew that if you paint a soldier as unstable and armed, the system doesn't ask questions first. It neutralizes the threat. That is a lie, I said, backing up as they advanced. I am perfectly fine. Your father stated you attacked your sister 2 days ago, the officer continued, his eyes narrowing. He said you were speaking incoherently and threatened to use your service weapon. I looked out into the hallway. Mrs. Higgins was there again, along with the couple from 4C, whispering and pointing. I was being stripped naked in front of my neighbors. But that wasn't the worst part. My mind raced through the regulations. If they took me in tonight, if they put me on an involuntary 72-hour psychiatric hold, my career was over. My security clearance would be flagged and suspended immediately. A sergeant with a suspended clearance is a sergeant without a job. I would be stripped of my weapon, placed on desk duty, and eventually processed for administrative discharge. My parents weren't just trying to embarrass me, they were trying to kill me professionally. They were willing to burn my entire life to the ground because I wouldn't pay their property tax. "Sir, please," I said, fighting the urge to scream. "Check the apartment. My weapon is locked in a safe. I am calm. This is retaliation." The MPs exchanged a look. One of them, a staff sergeant I vaguely recognized from the base gym, stepped forward. "Ma'am, if the family says you're a danger, we have to follow protocol," he said, his voice softer but firm. "We can't take chances." I was cornered. I was seconds away from being handcuffed and dragged out in front of my neighbors. Then clarity hit me. The recording. "I am being blackmailed," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor blade. "I have evidence on this phone." Before the Fayetteville officer could stop me, I unlocked my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I pulled up the voice memo from 2 mornings ago. "Listen," I said. "Just listen." I pressed play. The sound of chaos filled the quiet apartment. The audio was crystal clear. "Give me the debit card. You owe me $3,500. My father's drunken voice roared from the tiny speaker. "Ow! She's hurting me." Imani's fake scream followed. Then, the unmistakable sound of my own voice, calm and controlled. "I am giving you 10 seconds to clear this hallway." And then, the kicker. The threat. "Let's see how long you keep that uniform, Molly. Let's see what your commanding officer thinks when I file a report that you're mentally unstable." The silence that followed the recording was deafening. I didn't stop there. I switched apps and pulled up the text message from my father. I shoved the screen toward the Fayetteville officer's face. "You chose war. I am coming to you." "Does that look like a concerned father?" I asked, my voice cracking with the weight of the betrayal. "Or does that look like extortion?" The Fayetteville officer looked at the phone. Then he looked at me. His posture shifted. His hand moved away from his belt. The suspicion in his eyes evaporated, replaced by a look of profound, pitying disgust. He looked at the MPs. The staff sergeant nodded slowly. They knew. They saw it. "We apologize for the disturbance, Sergeant," the Fayetteville officer said, pulling out his notepad. "This is clearly a malicious false report. We deal with swatting calls, but rarely from parents." He wrote something down, ripping the page out. "I'm documenting this as harassment. If they come back, or if they call again, we will arrest them for filing a false police report." The MPs saluted me. It wasn't just protocol, it was an apology. They turned and marched out. The door clicked shut. I stood there in the middle of my living room. I should have felt relieved. I had won. I had saved my career. But as the adrenaline faded, my legs gave out. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor, burying my face in my hands. I didn't cry because I was scared. The fear was gone. I cried because, in that moment, I realized the absolute truth. My parents didn't love me. They didn't even like me. They were willing to destroy the only thing I had ever built for myself, my honor, my service, just to punish me for closing my wallet. They had tried to execute me. I wiped my face. The tears felt cold. I remembered a verse from the Bible my mother loved to quote so incorrectly. "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." I finally knew the truth, and for the first time in my life, I was free. The morning sun was filtering through my blinds, but the darkness hadn't lifted. It had just moved online. My phone pinged. It wasn't a text from my family this time. It was a message from Specialist Gonzalez, a guy in my unit. He didn't say anything, just sent a link with a grimacing emoji. I clicked it. It was a GoFundMe page. The title hit me like a physical slap. "Save an elderly veteran's home, abandoned by soldier daughter." My mother had been busy. Under a photo of her and Dad looking frail and tragic, a photo taken 5 years ago when Dad actually had the flu, she'd written a masterpiece of fiction. She claimed that the Army had brainwashed me, that I had become cold and heartless, and that I had cut off their medication money to buy a new truck. She claimed they were days away from being homeless because of my cruelty. They had already raised $500. I scrolled down to the comments. My blood boiled. There was Aunt Sarah again, leading the charge. "I always knew Molly was troubled. Such a disgrace to the family name. Praying for you, Deborah. Strangers were chiming in, calling me a traitor and a disappointment to the uniform. I sat there, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. They were monetizing my character assassination. They were using the sympathy people felt for veterans to scam the community, using my name as the villain to drive engagement. I could have called them, I could have screamed. But screaming doesn't leave a paper trail. I walked to my laptop. It was time for a situation report. I opened my personal Facebook page. I didn't write a sob story. I didn't use adjectives or emotional pleas. I treated this like a military briefing. Cold, hard, facts. I typed the headline, SITREP, the truth about the ungrateful daughter. Then, I uploaded 3 photos. Exhibit A, a high-resolution photo of the last will and testament. I circled the clause where my name was crossed out in red ink and the line awarding 100% of the assets to Imani because I was self-sufficient. Exhibit B, a redacted screenshot of my bank statements from the last 5 years. I highlighted the recurring allotment line. The total sum was circled at the bottom, $60,000. Exhibit C, the police report from last night. I zoomed in on the officer's handwritten notes. Malicious false report. No evidence of mental instability. Subject is being harassed by family. I wrote a simple caption. I have supported my parents for 5 years. I fixed their roof with my own hands. I was disinherited because I work, and my sister was rewarded because she doesn't. When I stopped paying their bills, they called the police to try and strip me of my security clearance. This GoFundMe is a fraud. Do not donate to people who punish their children for succeeding. I hovered over the post button. This was the nuclear option. Once I did this, there was no going back to Sunday dinners or Christmas cards. I hit post. In a small town like Fayetteville, gossip travels faster than the speed of sound. For the first 10 minutes, there was silence. Then, the notifications started. But they weren't the angry pings from before. They were a deluge. The first comment was from Mrs. Gable, a neighbor who lived 2 doors down from my parents. Wait. Richard told me that new truck was a gift from you. He said he bought it with his warehouse bonus. He hasn't worked in 10 years. Then, a guy Dad used to drink with. I saw Richard at the bar last night buying rounds. If he's broke, he sure drinks expensive beer. The tide turned so fast it was dizzying. The poor elderly couple narrative crumbled under the weight of the receipts. People don't like being scammed. Then came the kill shot. Pastor Jenkins, the head of the church my mother attended every Sunday to show off her hats, commented. His profile picture was smiling, but his words were Old Testament fire. Deborah, I am looking at these police reports. God sees all, and so does this community. You are bearing false witness against your own child. Take this fraudulent page down immediately, or do not return to my congregation on Sunday. It was over. The highest moral authority in their world had just publicly condemned them. 20 minutes later, the GoFundMe link went dead. Page not found. My phone rang. It was Dad. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. I pressed play, needing to hear the surrender. What the hell did you do, Molly? His voice was slurring, trembling with a mixture of booze and genuine fear. Mrs. Gable just spit at me in the driveway. The pastor called the house. You killed us, Molly. Everyone is laughing at us. How could you do this? He still didn't get it. He thought he was the victim because he got caught. I didn't reply. I posted one final status update. Mission accomplished. Please do not use family for profit. I am done. I turned off my phone. I walked over to the sliding glass door and stepped out onto my tiny balcony. The air was crisp. The sky was a brilliant, piercing Carolina blue. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that finally felt like it belonged to me. I had lost my family, yes. But looking at that sky, I realized I had regained something much more valuable. I had my honor back. And for the first time in 26 years, the war was over. I had won. 2 months had passed since the truth bomb exploded, and the fallout had settled into a thick, suffocating gray dust. My apartment was quiet, abnormally quiet. For 5 years, my life had been a cacophony of demands. The phone ringing with requests for money. The text messages guilt-tripping me about missed birthdays or broken appliances. The chaotic noise of my family's drama. Now the silence was so absolute I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the bedroom. You would think I would be relieved. I had cut out the cancer. The surgery was a success. But nobody tells you about the phantom pain. I found myself picking up my phone, staring at the black screen, waiting. Waiting for what? An apology? A scream? Even a curse word would have been better than this. It would have proven that I still existed to them. But there was nothing. They had ghosted me. They had moved on to their trailer park and their misery. And they had erased me from their narrative completely. I had won the war, but I was sitting in the ruins, all by myself. It was late November now, Thanksgiving. The base was a ghost town. Most of the unit was on block leave, scattering across the country to go home to turkey dinners and football games. I stayed behind. I volunteered for extra charge of quarters duty just to have a reason to wear my uniform, just to have a place to be that wasn't my empty living room. When my shift ended at 2000 hours, the town of Fayetteville was shut down. Every restaurant, every grocery store closed for the holiday. Except one. I drove my truck down Skibo Road, the tires humming on the empty asphalt, until I saw the familiar yellow block letters glowing in the night. Waffle House. The parking lot had a few cars. It is the sanctuary for the lonely, the shift workers, and the displaced. I walked in, the smell of grease, coffee, and maple syrup hitting me like a warm blanket. I took a booth in the back corner. "What can I get you, hun?" the waitress asked. Her name tag said Betty. She looked like she had been working here since the Reagan administration, with kind eyes and hair teased high. "Chicken and waffles, please, and coffee. Black," I said. "Coming right up." I looked around. 2 booths over, there was a family, a young couple, and a toddler. They were laughing. The dad was wiping whipped cream off the kid's nose. It was such a small, stupidly normal thing. I looked down at my hands. A lump formed in my throat, hot and sharp. I had saved $60,000. I had saved my career. I had saved my dignity. So why did I feel like the poorest person in this room? The food arrived. I cut into the waffle, watching the syrup pool on the plate. A single tear escaped, hot and humiliating, splashing right into the butter. Then another. I wiped them away furiously, hoping no one saw the sergeant crying over her breakfast for dinner. "Here now," a voice said softly. It was Betty. She wasn't holding the coffee pot. She was holding a small plate with a slice of pecan pie, steam still rising from the crust. She slid it onto the table. "I didn't order this," I stammered, sniffing. "I know," Betty said. She looked at the unit patch on the jacket I had draped over the seat. Then she looked me right in the eye. She didn't ask why I was alone on Thanksgiving. She didn't ask where my family was. She just knew. "It's on the house, sugar," she said, her voice sounding like gravel and honey. "Thank you for your service." She turned to walk away, then paused and leaned in, resting a hand on the edge of the table. "You look like you're carrying a heavy load, baby girl," she whispered. "Just remember this. Sometimes the good Lord separates us from our kin to protect our spirit. Being alone don't mean you're broken. It means you're safe." The air left my lungs. It was as if she had read the transcript of my life. "Thank you," I whispered. "Eat your pie. It's got extra bourbon in the filling." She winked and walked back to the grill. I took a bite. The sweetness filled my mouth, warm and rich. It wasn't the taste of family tradition. It was the taste of kindness from a stranger. I sat there for an hour, eating that pie, and for the first time in 2 months, the cold, hollow feeling in my chest began to thaw. I looked at the young family again, but this time I didn't feel jealousy. I felt hope. Family wasn't just biology. Biology is an accident of birth. Family is the people who feed you when you're hungry. Family is the waitress who gives you free pie because she sees your pain. Family is the squad mates who sent me texts all day wishing me a happy Thanksgiving. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the contact for Dad, then Mom, then Imani. I didn't stare at them with longing anymore. I didn't feel the urge to call and beg for a scrap of affection. I felt protective of the woman sitting in this booth. I needed to keep her safe from them. I tapped the screen. Block caller. I did it again. Block caller, and again. Block caller. I put the phone face down on the table. Goodbye, I whispered to the empty seat across from me. I hope you find peace, but I'm going to find mine right here. I took a sip of the bitter black coffee. It tasted better than any Thanksgiving wine I had ever had. I wasn't just full, I was free. This was the hardest holiday of my life, but also the most important one. Loneliness is a heavy price to pay for peace, but I promise you, it is worth every penny. If you have ever had to spend a holiday alone to protect your mental health, please hit that like button so we can support each other. And drop a peace over drama in the comments if you chose yourself this year. I left a $20 tip for Betty, put on my jacket, and walked out into the cool November night. The silence wasn't scary anymore. It was just quiet, and I was ready to start filling it with something new. A few days after the silent Thanksgiving at Waffle House, the unit returned from block leave. The barracks were loud again, filled with stories of turkey comas, football arguments, and mothers who cooked too much. I usually tuned it out, keeping my head down and my focus on the mission roster. Cook! A heavy hand landed on my shoulder, nearly knocking the clipboard out of my grip. I turned to see Staff Sergeant Martinez grinning at me. Martinez was a tank of a man, built like a linebacker with a laugh that could rattle windows. I heard a rumor, he said, leaning in. Word is you spent the holiday pulling extra duty and eating diner food. Is that true? I stiffened, my defensive walls instantly going up. I just wanted the hours, Martinez. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal, he interrupted, shaking his head. Maria is making her famous tamales this weekend, her abuela's recipe. If I don't bring you over, she's going to kick my butt. You're coming, Saturday, 1800. Don't make me give you a direct order. I opened my mouth to make an excuse, to say I had laundry, or I was tired, or simply that I preferred my solitude. But then I looked at him. There was no pity in his dark eyes, just genuine, stubborn camaraderie. He wasn't asking because he felt sorry for the orphan soldier. He was asking because we were battle buddies. Okay, I said, my voice softer than I intended. I'll be there. On Saturday evening, I pulled up to Martinez's house. It was a modest single-story ranch, smaller than my parents' house, with a tricycle overturned on the front lawn and a slightly overgrown hedge. As soon as I opened the front door, I was hit by a wall of sound and smell. It was chaos. Beautiful, unscripted chaos. There were 3 kids running loops around the living room, screaming with delight. 2 golden retrievers were barking and skidding on the hardwood floors. The air smelled thick with cumin, chili powder, and slow-roasted pork. Molly! A woman I had only met once at a unit Christmas party came rushing out of the kitchen. Maria didn't offer a handshake. She pulled me into a hug that squeezed the air out of my lungs. She smelled like corn masa and expensive perfume. I am so glad you came. Martinez told me you've been working too hard, she said, pulling back to look at me. You look skinny. We need to fix that. For the next 2 hours, I sat in their kitchen, surrounded by noise. Martinez's parents were visiting from Texas. His mom kept piling tamales onto my plate faster than I could eat them. His dad, a quiet man with weathered hands, kept refilling my iced tea. Here is what didn't happen. No one asked me how much money I made. No one hinted that the roof needed fixing. No one asked for a loan. No one compared me to a sibling. They just wanted to know if I liked spicy salsa. They wanted to tell me funny stories about Martinez falling out of a tree when he was 6. They wanted me to be there, simply because I was Molly. After dinner, the noise inside reached a fever pitch as the kids started a pillow fight. I stepped out onto the back deck to catch my breath. The night air was cool, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. The sliding door opened and Martinez's father, Papa Martinez, as the kids called him, stepped out. He was holding 2 cold modelos. He handed one to me and sat down on the bench nearby. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the crickets. Jose tells me you had to cut some dead wood from your life, he said. His voice was gravelly, his English heavily accented, but deliberate. I gripped the cold bottle. I had a falling out with my parents, sir. Falling out, he repeated, tasting the words. He shook his head. I was a gardener for 30 years, Molly. You know the secret to a strong tree? I shook my head. Pruning, he said, making a cutting motion with his hand. Sometimes a branch gets sick. It gets rot. If you leave it, because you think, oh, it is part of the tree, I must keep it, the rot spreads. It kills the roots. You have to cut the sick branch. It hurts the tree for a moment. But then, the tree grows stronger, taller. He looked at me, his dark eyes filled with a kindness that felt ancient. You did the hard thing, he said. Do not let the guilt eat your roots. You are a good tree, Molly. I felt a lump form in my throat, harder and tighter than the one at Waffle House, but this time, it didn't hurt. It felt like a release. For the first time in my life, a father figure was offering me wisdom to protect me, not to exploit me. Thank you, I whispered. Drink your beer, he smiled. Before the grandkids find us and turn us into jungle gyms. Driving home that night, the silence in my truck felt different. It wasn't empty anymore. I realized that for 26 years, I had been fighting for a seat at a table where I wasn't wanted. I thought family was DNA. I thought it was shared last names and shared history. I was wrong. Family isn't blood. Blood is just a biological accident. Family is the waitress who gives you pie when you're crying. Family is the sergeant who demands you come over for dinner. Family is the old man on a porch who tells you that it's okay to protect your roots. I had lost a toxic family, yes, but in the process, I had found a tribe. I tapped my steering wheel in time to the radio. I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. I wasn't the tired, angry soldier anymore. I was smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. I turned into my apartment complex. The windows were dark, but inside me, the lights were finally turning on. Spring arrived in North Carolina with a vengeance. The air was thick with yellow pollen, coating every car hood and driveway in a fine, dusty layer. For the first time in years, the changing of the seasons didn't bring me anxiety. I wasn't worrying about cleaning my parents' gutters or paying for their AC unit service. Life had moved on. But the past has a way of echoing, even when you stop shouting back. It started with a text message on a Tuesday afternoon. It was from Jason, a guy I went to high school with who still lived 3 streets over from my parents' house. We hadn't spoken in years, so seeing his name pop up was jarring. There was no text, just an image attachment. I tapped the screen to enlarge it. It was a photo of 402 Oak Street, the house I had grown up in, the house where I had spent last July sweating on the roof with a nail gun. In the front yard, right where my mother used to meticulously plant her hydrangeas, stood a large white sign with bold red lettering. Bank foreclosure. Auction pending. I zoomed in on the photo. The grass was knee-high. The shutter I had fixed was hanging crooked again. Without my constant infusion of cash and labor, the house had begun to rot from the inside out. I stared at the image for a long time. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt a cold, hard sense of inevitability. Physics dictates that if you remove the foundation, the structure falls. I was the foundation. They removed me. This was just gravity doing its job. Without my $800 a month, plus the emergency cash infusions for medicine and groceries, they hadn't lasted 6 months. My curiosity got the better of me. I admit it. I wanted to see the wreckage. I logged into my burner Instagram account, the one I used to keep tabs without engaging, and navigated to Imani's profile. The transformation was stark. Gone were the filtered photos of Starbucks cups and shopping bags. Gone were the soft life hashtags. Her latest story was a text-only rant against a black background. Need a roommate ASAP, must be chill. My landlord is a literal psycho and evicted me for no reason. DM me serious inquiries only. She wasn't living in the house anymore. The moment the ship started sinking, the rat had jumped. She hadn't stayed to help Mom and Dad pack. She hadn't used her youth and energy to get a job to save the family home. She had bailed. I scrolled further. There were comments from mutual acquaintances. The rumor mill in Fayetteville is efficient. My parents had been evicted 3 weeks ago. They hadn't moved into a nice apartment. They were living in a trailer park on the outskirts of town, out past the highway where the streetlights stop working. And the cherry on top? My mother, Deborah, the woman who used to brag that she was too delicate for manual labor, was now working as a cashier at the Piggly Wiggly grocery store, the same job she used to mock when I was in high school. Karma hadn't just knocked on their door, it had kicked it in. That evening, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Usually, I let unknown numbers go to voicemail, but something, maybe intuition, maybe the lingering ghost of the daughter I used to be, made me answer. "This is Sergeant Cook," I answered, my voice professional and clipped. "Molly?" The voice was thin, raspy, and sounded 20 years older than it should have. It was my father. But the booming arrogance was gone. The threat in his voice from that night in my hallway had evaporated, replaced by a pathetic tremor. "What do you want, Richard?" I asked. I couldn't call him Dad. Not anymore. "Molly, please don't hang up," he wheezed. We lost the house. The bank took it. We're living in a trailer off Highway 87. It's not good here, Molly. The heating doesn't work right." I remained silent. I let the silence stretch out, forcing him to fill it. "Imani left," he continued, his voice cracking. "She took the car and drove to Atlanta with some boyfriend. She left us, Molly, after everything we gave her." I wasn't surprised. Imani's loyalty was a subscription service, and their payment method had been declined. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. It was the polite, detached response you give to a stranger who tells you they have a flat tire. "Molly," he said, and I heard the desperation creeping in. "We found a better apartment, but we need the security deposit. It's just $1,200. Mom is working, and I'm applying for disability again. I swear, I promise, we will pay you back." There it was. The hook. He wasn't calling to apologize for the police raid. He wasn't calling to apologize for the GoFundMe lies. He was calling because he needed a new ATM. He thought that if he played the sad old man card, I would forget that he tried to have me arrested and discharged. I took a deep breath. I looked around my living room, my clean, quiet, peaceful living room. "You promised to pay me back?" I asked. Yes, on the Bible," he rushed to say. "Richard," I said, keeping my voice steady, "do you remember the file on your desk? The one with the red ink?" He went silent. "You wrote that I was self-sufficient," I said. "You wrote that I didn't need anything from this family, and you gave everything to Imani because she needed the help." "Molly, that was just—" "No," I cut him off. "You were right. I am self-sufficient. And now you have to be self-sufficient too. I am respecting your wishes. The Bank of Molly is permanently closed." "Molly, you can't do this. We are your parents," he cried out, the anger starting to leak back into his tone, the entitlement resurfacing. "I can," I said. "Imani has the assets. Call her." I pulled the phone away from my ear. I didn't slam it down. I simply pressed the red end call button. I sat there for a moment, waiting for the guilt to hit me. I waited for the wave of shame that my mother had programmed into me since birth. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a profound sense of balance. The scales had finally tipped. They were experiencing the consequences of their own choices. It wasn't my job to save people who were determined to drown, especially when they had spent 5 years trying to hold my head under water. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to start dinner. I was making spaghetti. Just for one. And it was going to taste like justice. It was July again in North Carolina. The humidity was just as thick as it had been the day I stood on my parents' roof with a nail gun, sweating through my t-shirt. But this time, I wasn't fixing a roof for people who hated me. I was standing on the sidewalk, looking up at a small, sturdy red brick house with a white picket fence. It wasn't a mansion. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch, tucked away in a quiet cul-de-sac. But to me, it looked like a castle. I walked up the driveway, the keys jingling in my pocket. I'd bought this place 2 weeks ago. I didn't need a cosigner. I didn't need a handout. I used my VA loan, a benefit I earned through blood, sweat, and early mornings. And I put down a down payment using the savings I had protected from my family. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air conditioning hit me, cool and welcoming. It smelled like fresh paint and lemon cleaner. I walked to the living room wall. I wasn't holding a nail gun to repair a leak today. I was holding a small hammer to hang a picture. I centered the frame. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't a picture of Richard, Deborah, or Imani. It was a candid shot taken at a backyard barbecue last month. It showed me, laughing with my head thrown back, sitting next to Staff Sergeant Martinez and his wife, with Betty from Waffle House standing behind us holding a tray of brownies. I stepped back to admire it. This was my fortress. And in this fortress, only love and respect were allowed to cross the threshold. The gatekeepers were gone. I was the queen of my own castle now. My life had changed outside these walls too. The army recognized that the weight I had been carrying was gone. I was lighter, faster, sharper. Last month, I stood tall as they pinned the chevrons of a staff sergeant on my chest. E6, a leader of soldiers. With the rank came new responsibilities. I volunteered to lead the unit's financial readiness seminars for the new recruits. Every Tuesday, I walked into a classroom full of 18-year-old privates. They looked so young, their haircuts high and tight, their uniforms stiff. But in their eyes, I saw the same fear and confusion I used to feel. I saw the desperate need to please the people back home. I stood at the podium yesterday, looking at a young private named Miller. He had asked me if he should send his entire signing bonus to his mom because she wanted a new car. I walked over to his desk, looked him in the eye, and gave him the advice that would have saved me 5 years of heartache. "Private Miller," I said, my voice firm, but quiet. "Filial piety is a virtue, but financial suicide is just stupid. You cannot save anyone if you are drowning. And you should never, ever set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm." I saw the realization hit him. I saw his shoulders drop an inch as the burden lifted. That was my legacy. I wasn't just building a career, I was building a firewall for the next generation, teaching them that no is a complete sentence and that boundaries are necessary for survival. As the sun began to dip below the pine trees, painting the sky in strokes of purple and orange, I walked out to my back porch. I sat down in a rocking chair, my rocking chair, not my father's, and picked up a glass of sweet tea. The condensation was cold against my palm. The ice clinked softly as I swirled it. I allowed my mind to drift to them one last time. I didn't feel the burning rage of the day I found the will. I didn't feel the hollow sadness of that lonely Thanksgiving. I felt detached. Like I was remembering characters from a book I finished reading a long time ago. Hate is a poison you drink expecting the other person to die. I had spat the poison out. I forgave them. Not because they apologized, they never would. And not because I wanted them back in my life. They were never getting back in. I forgave them because I refused to carry their luggage on my journey. They were the past, fading in the rearview mirror as I drove toward the horizon. I hoped they found peace in their trailer or wherever they ended up. But their chaos was no longer my climate. I took a sip of the tea. It was sweet, cold, and perfect. I looked at my reflection in the sliding glass door. I saw a woman who had walked through fire and came out made of steel. I saw a staff sergeant, a homeowner, a friend, a survivor. "Here's to you, Molly," I whispered, raising the glass to the woman in the reflection. The phone in my pocket was silent. My bank account was secure. My heart was full. The war was finally over. And I had won. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my journey, it is this. Setting boundaries is not an act of betrayal. It is an act of self-preservation. Many of us are taught that family comes first, at the expense of our own sanity. But remember, you cannot pour from an empty cup. Real love does not demand that you bankrupt your future to pay for someone else's mistakes. Protecting your peace, your finances, and your mental health is the highest form of self-respect. You're allowed to walk away from anyone who hurts you, even if you share the same last name. Now, I want to hear from you. I know my story isn't unique. There are thousands of you out there silently carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, just like I did. Have you ever had to make the hard choice to cut off a toxic family member to save yourself? How did you find the courage? Please share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community here where no one has to fight alone. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's keep telling the truth together.